Good day, everyone. That's right. It is the weekend, and we have the weekly recap. All the top stories that we brought to you here on Crime Talk, conveniently located in one location. You're welcome. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great day. First, Bryan Kohberger. All right, as everyone should know by now, or a lot of people know, that the Latah County Prosecutor's Office gave notice back in June that they are going to seek the death penalty against Bryan Kohberger because they said that the killings were especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. Kind of stuff that, death penalty statutes are made of. That's the kind of language that they have to put in there. Well, the prosecutors stand by their pursuit of the death penalty, stating that it is appropriate because there are obviously multiple victims. The defendant exhibited utter disregard for life, and that they alleged Mr. Kohberger acted with reckless indifference to human life, and that he represents a threat to society in the future if he were ever released. And, the trial is scheduled to begin in October and will last an estimated 6 weeks. We all know that's not going to happen given the death penalty, but that's just the way it is. Now, prosecutors also provided notice saying that, hey, we're open to mitigation, which is anything that would be sympathetic towards the prosecutors so that they could say, hey, maybe this is something that we should consider, and a jury wouldn't give him the death penalty if they knew about this. So that's what we call mitigation, okay? And so the DA says we are open to that. Now, understand, Bryan Kohberger is entitled to the presumption of innocence. Although he's been charged, we're not saying that he's guilty of anything, but he has been accused of obviously killing 4 people. And more specifically, those 4 people are Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Zaina Kernoble, and Ethan Chapin. Now, the prosecutors have met with the victims' families to discuss the death penalty with Kernodle's mother, Kara Northington, and she favors life in prison for Mr. Kohberger if he's convicted. Her father, however, Jeff, is in favor of the death penalty for Mr. Kohberger. The Goncalves and the Mogens are also in favor of the death penalty, and the Chapins have not made their position public just yet. Why go death? Well, the obvious reason is 4 young people brutally had their lives taken. Let's face it, in Idaho, like in most states, you can get up to the ultimate sentence of life in prison without parole for 1 murder. So that becomes the great dilemma. What do you do with somebody that commits, well, not 1, not 2, but 3, 4 murders? What, do they get a volume discount for crime? Then always it is a tool for negotiation for the prosecutors. If someone thinks that they are going to be subject to the death penalty, they may say, hey, I really don't want to die. Maybe if I offer them life without parole with a guilty plea, would they take death off the table? It is a tool for negotiations that the prosecutors have. Now, on the other side, people say, well, the death penalty is really expensive. Proponents of it say, who cares? It is the cost of doing business. It is overhead what a society has to have a good order and discipline, so to speak, in the community. You have to have jail. It's like police. It's a cost of doing business. And whether Bryan Kohberger is sitting in prison for the rest of his life or sitting in prison for the rest of his life where they're trying to kill him, it really doesn't matter. They're going to have to pay the bill, whether he's there fighting the death penalty case or not, assuming he's convicted, obviously. Now, is there any deterrence to the death penalty? Well, some people would say no. In the heat of the moment, are you thinking about, I better not do this because I could get the death penalty? Probably not. It's not about deterrence. It's really about punishment, retribution. That's really what it is. It is the state saying we are going to kill you because you can't behave like a civilized human being in our society. So let me know what you think. I mean, it's the type of situation as it relates to Bryan Kohberger is you have killed 4 people, accused. Let me clarify that. You have been accused of killing 4 people. And if you are convicted of that, do you deserve to die? Some people say yes. Some people say no. You should never kill anybody. Let me know. It is a hot topic that people just, they want to talk about it. And then if he is convicted, and then you have lethal injection or a firing squad. Firing squad was added. Why? Because there's a shortage of all of the lethal injection drugs that they need to effectuate that form of the punishment. Then on the other hand, you got guys, remember like Tim McVeigh? Remember the Oklahoma City bomber? that once he was sentenced to death by Judge Mach, even though he had some legitimate post-conviction motions because the FBI found boxes and boxes of discovery in a closet somewhere that hadn't been turned over to the defense. What did he do? He said, no, let's do this. So you have to admire a guy that could have spent the next 40 years alive in prison. And he was like, no, let's just go get this over with. Makes you got a lot of areas to think about. Let me know what you think. All right. Bryan Kohberger's speedy trial is delayed for 37 days? That's right. As you may recall, Bryan Kohberger's attorneys requested a stay in the tolling of the speedy trial, saying that there was substantial failure to comply with the selection procedures for the grand jury. Remember, the grand jury is the group of citizens, usually 15 or more, that hear a case to establish if there's probable cause. It's not a real trial. The defense isn't present. The prosecutor presents their evidence, and usually the grand jury rubber stamps the indictment, or they come back no bill if that's what the prosecutor wants. Pretty straightforward. As long as the grand jurors stated that they were fair and impartial, they are deemed to be sufficient grand jurors. So Bryan Kohberger's attorneys asked for an indefinite stay of the proceedings, but the court denied that. So the judge said that he was going to grant a stay for 37 days. And that is just the amount of time for Kohberger and his defense to review the material from the grand jury proceedings. Now, originally, the prosecutors objected to Mr. Kohberger's request, and then Mr. Kohberger filed a sworn statement in support of the fact that the motion to stay the proceedings was appropriate. However, the judge determined that the motion is premature since Kohberger hasn't even yet reviewed the grand jury records, which were needed to actually say that something inappropriate had taken place. And since those aren't prepared just as of yet, the court granted the 37 days. So the court noted less than 2 weeks ago, the court agreed to release some of the grand jury materials for the defense to review. Despite this, the court determined that Mr. Kohberger and his defense have the right to review the material from the grand jury as well as the right to challenge the grand jury selection process. The court ultimately denied Kohberger's request to stay the proceedings, but due to the complexities of the case, however, the court did grant him time to review the material and decide whether they want to refile their motion to stay the proceedings to challenge the grand jury selection process. Now, the court acknowledged Mr. Kohberger's right to the speedy trial and ordered a stay in the running of the speedy trial clock until August 1st. This allows him 37 additional days to review the material without giving him his right to a speedy trial. The judge said this motion does not affect any other aspect of the case or the trial's scheduled start date. Now, Kohberger's trial start date is set to begin on October 2nd, but could be moved if the defense decides those extra 37 days aren't really enough to prepare for trial. Now, a hearing is set to consider any motions that Mr. Kohberger has filed up to this date, and that will be held on August 18th at 10:30 a.m., and we will be listening and watching, well, assuming they let us watch. We'll see. So what does this really mean? First, the defense had to file the motion alleging some sort of irregularities with the selection of the grand jury process. Why? Because it is a death penalty case. So what does this mean? First, the defense had to file the motion alleging some sort of irregularity with the grand jury selection process. However, without the transcripts, it's tough to make any argument that anything inappropriate took place. One could even argue that the attorneys don't necessarily have a good faith basis when they haven't seen the grand jury transcripts. Although this is kind of a chicken and the egg problem, I can't tell if there's a problem until they give me the transcripts, but they won't give me the transcripts regarding the selection process because you're not entitled to it. Point is, they filed this motion because it is a death penalty case. They will file every motion they can possibly come up with, and they will comply with the time limits provided by any of the statutes so that they do not waive any of those motions. As you may recall, the defense had to file a notice of alibi. Even though they hadn't really dug into the case and been able to say what the alibi was, they had to do that so it's not waived down the road. Now, second, motions alleging the grand jury misconduct are rare, and they are granted even more rarely, so you shouldn't lose any sleep. Now, I guess anything is possible. There's something that could come up, but I'm a little skeptical of that indeed. Yes, Leslie Van Houten walked out of a California prison yesterday after serving 53 years of a life sentence for her participation in 2 of the infamous Manson murders. Now, Van Houten, the youngest member of that cult, was released to parole supervision and driven to transitional housing. The convicted killer, who is now 73, is expected to spend about a year in this transitional housing, learning the basic skills such as how to go to the grocery store and buy groceries with a debit card. Yes, the world has changed quite a bit since she was out as a young child. Well, Van Houten was serving a life sentence, as we noted, for helping Charles Manson. Yeah, that Charles Manson, the crazy man, and other members of that cult by carrying out the 1969 killing of Lino LaBianca, a grocer in Los Angeles, and his wife, Rosemary. Now, her release comes just 4 days after the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, announced that he would not fight a state appeals court ruling that Van Houten should be granted parole. He stated the reason for that is it's pretty unlikely that the Supreme Court would consider that appeal, so we're just not going to do it. Anyway, Van Houten was 19 when she and the other cult members killed via knife the couple as part of the Manson's deranged plan to incite a race war by terrifying Los Angeles residents on a killing spree. She has shared how she held Rosemary down as she was murdered before stabbing her in the stomach some 16 times, and how she helped Patricia Kernwinkle, Tex Watson, and Glam Grogan carve up Leno's body before smearing the couple's blood on the walls. Real nice lady. The killer also wiped down fingerprints from surfaces and drank chocolate milk from the couple's refrigerator. The slayings happened the day after Manson followers killed actress Sharon Tate and 4 others, and Van Houten did not participate in the Tate killings, so she's got that going for her. Anyway, over the years, Van Houten has said that she regrets the killings, claiming she is mentally ill and became deranged after using LSD and actually believing that Charles Manson was Jesus Christ. Van Houten was first sentenced to death for her crime, but her sentence was ultimately reduced to life in prison after the capital punishment was outlawed in California in 1972. Needless to say, relatives of the Manson victims spoke out against Van Houten's release, and one of the family members stated, quote, "My family and I are heartbroken because we're once again reminded of all the years that we've not had my father and my stepmother with us." That was Corey LaBianca, Lino Bianca's daughter. Let me know, ladies and gentlemen, she's 73. Is she really a danger to society? Is 53 years enough for a life sentence? Did she get off easy? Should the governor have fought it a little harder? Who knows? Let me know in the comments below, but the reality of it is she's out. She has got herself a college degree and a master's degree while she's been in custody, so at least she did that, but she did, help kill 2 people and stab them up pretty good. Let me know if 53 years was enough. Yes, that's right, the Bryan Kohberger case. Demolition of the home where the 4 University of Idaho students were murdered last year has been suspended while the murder suspect Bryan Kohberger trial continues. The college announced Wednesday that the 3-story home on King Road in Moscow, Idaho, will remain intact until at least October as the local population continues to grieve the 20 and 21-year-old students found dead on November 13th of last year. Now, the university said, on the one hand, some people want it taken down. It is a constant reminder of the heinous acts that went on inside, according to the university president. And on the other hand, it elicits a strong response from those working through grief and who fear its destruction could impact the court case. So the house, which is now owned by the university, has obviously remained vacant and will continue to do so. Anyway, Bryan Kohberger obviously has been charged with breaking into the home just a few feet away from the campus and fatally stabbing Zaina Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Maddie Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalve. Now, the home may be needed for trial, either for some sort of evidentiary purpose or for a potential juror visit. Probably very unlikely, but hey, if you're the prosecution, you're probably urging the university not to tear it down, just in case, so the defense can't make some sort of argument of, oh, if we had just had a little more time in there. Now remember, the defense and their investigators were given opportunity to go into that home shortly after Bryan Kohberger's arrest, so they presumably got what they wanted and they needed. It'd be a little disingenuous argument, but hey, doesn't mean they wouldn't make it. Now, for those who aren't familiar with this case, obviously the victims were discovered with knife wounds the following day on the second and third floor of the home. The women had all lived in the home with the two other roommates, both of whom they were on the first floor, and they all survived. Now, Kohberger was arrested on December 30th of 2020, later indicted on the charges of burglary, or 1 count of burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder. He's entered a plea of not guilty. The matter is set for trial on October 2nd, and the prosecution seeks the death penalty. A suspected serial killer has been arrested over the notorious Gilgo Beach murders in Long Island. Now, I've looked it up. I think I'm pronouncing it correct, Gilgo, but I'm sure somebody will tell me it's mispronounced. But that's what we're going with today. All right, everybody? Now, a guy by the name of Rex Heuermann, Heuermann, he's a 59-year-old white guy, and he's a married architect at a New York City firm. His arrest is tied to the Gilgo Four, where 4 women, Melissa Barthelme, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, were found wrapped in burlap within days of each other back in 2010. Now, the body of Bartholomew was first found along Ocean Parkway on December 11th, 2020, sparking fears of a serial killer in the area. By spring of 2011, the number of bodies had climbed to as high as 10, including 8 women, as well as an unidentified man and a toddler. Now, Heuermann's arrest comes after the Suffolk County News Police Commissioner created a special Gilgo Beach homicide investigation task force back in February of 2020. Police raided the home of the Long Island alleged serial killer and have picked up a truck from the property as he prepares for his first court appearance today. Now, like I said, the suspect, Mr. Heuermann, was arrested last night in Midtown Manhattan outside of his architectural office on 5th Avenue. He is suspected in the murders of the Gilgo Four, which were all alleged prostitutes, and whose remains were found in the Long Island Beach area back in December of 2010. Many similarities can be drawn between Heuermann, a married father of 2, and the killer described back in 2011 by an FBI profiler regarding these killings. That profiler said that it would be a sadistic but charming average Joe who could blend into any environment basically unnoticed. Now, Heuermann lived in a seemingly normal average Joe life until yesterday, and it remains unclear what specific piece of evidence led to the arrest last night. He is due to be in court about noon today. There isn't some information that the location of phone calls matched Heuermann's home address as well as his office. And there's also reports that there is a belt with some initials that say WH or HM on it, depending on how you hold that belt. And the decades-long investigation has been described as one of the most intense hunts for a serial killer. Now, the victims were first discovered back in December of 2010. They were Maureen Brainerd Barnes, she was 25, Melissa Bartholomew, 24, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, who was 27. Known as the Gilgo Beach Four, their bodies were found wrapped in burlap sacks. Some of the 4 had been missing for 3 years by the time their bodies were actually located. All were alleged sex workers who advertised their services on Craigslist, leading police to believe that it is how the killer first made contact with the women. Some had also told friends that they planned to meet a client the day before they vanished. And then in March and April of 2011, another 4 bodies were found in the same area, including that of a toddler. They were Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and an unidentified woman known as Peaches, or Jane Doe number 3. Now, Peaches' toddler daughter was also murdered. Now, in the following weeks, another 2 sets of remains were found. One belonged to an Asian man, now thought to have been a transgender sex worker who had been dead for 5 or 6 years, and Jane Doe number 7, whose remains were found on the beach in a popular tourist town, Fire Island. We'll see where this goes. Obviously, everybody loves a good serial killer, and I mean that obviously not good as it relates to the victims, but it's always good that they have found the guy, or at least they believe is the guy. We're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, he's entitled to the presumption of innocence, but there must be something there, obviously, to establish probable cause that Mr. Heuermann may have done something. We'll have to wait and see. It's always interesting when it is that everyday Joe, the guy walking down the street. That's right. What does a serial killer look like? You never know.